Welcome to this edition of Fly Tying 101 with Endo. And tonight we're going to be tying the Clouser Minnow. And we're going to tie it in white and green. Of course, the traditional is more of a yellow and red, but improvise, use whatever you have or whatever colors you like for the waters you're fishing. So let me switch over to my other camera here. We've got a hook. That's a fairly large hook, probably a number, it's a 4 or 6 and it's extra long. I generally like to match my thread to one of the colors of the deer hair that we're going to be using. We're using green and white. I'm going to go with an olive thread. It's about the closest I have. We don't need to cover the whole hook in thread tonight, because we're not going to cover the whole hook in materials. So we'll just cover the middle portion for now. And then we'll start with some of this tinsel or flash. I'm going to fold that up into 3 pieces. It's a mess at the moment, but we'll fix that out. I'll fix it up in the end here. We'll just get them tied in. Come to about the length we want. And this is a pretty large fly. We're going to go, some versions of this, if you look them up, they tie them with smaller hooks and a much longer tail sticking out well past the hook. You could do that, but you tend to get more tail grabs on that. A lot of times a fish will just grab the tail end of your fly. So I've got 3 or 4 fibers on here is all. Gonna wrap the thread around it there. Oops. Try to spread those around the hook a little bit so they kind of fan out. There we go. Now we're going to build up a little bit of a thread base. On this fly, we're going to use these heavy dumbbell, eyes, if we can not drop them on the floor. Good thing I have another one right here. These heavy dumbbell eyes, those are lead or maybe they're lead free. I'm not sure which ones Joe has provided here. They're really going to make your fly sink in the water. And so, as you fish this fly, you'll want to strip it along and then let it sit and it's going to dive. And then you're going to strip it along and it's going to dive and strip it along. So these heavy eyes really give it some good action. I'm going to switch back to the other camera there for you. We're going to make 2 little thread bumps. One there and one there. That's going to create kind of a little notch or a saddle for these eyes. Now we're going to set it right between the two thread bumps. Yeah, you can see that on the camera, I think. I can see it on my screen at least. Set that in between the 2 thread bumps, a few wraps in each direction. Now we're just going to keep doing crosses over the top. If you can see that. Okay, and then we're going to do this one here, where I'm going to stay under the eyes and over the hook. And that combined with the previous one is really going to suck it all together. So you do those crossovers, and then you do that wrap stay over the hook and under the eyes. And you want to have a nice tight hold on your bobbin to make sure that thread gets nice and tight. The other one I like is over the eye, under the hook towards me, over the eye. So as I go over the eye, I'm staying on the same side of the hook. I don't know how well this is going to show up on the camera. Maybe this way. See, over the eye, under the hook, over the eye, and I'm staying on the same side of the hook. And again, that one with this other one where we stay above the hook, go around in a circle under the eyes, really cinches it together. When you get this on there, they're still going to wiggle a little bit. But you give it a few extras and they start to get pretty tight. The other thing I found that helps is to anchor your thread back to the hook once in a while with just a few wraps on the hook itself. Yeah, that's getting better. So we should get those eyes nice and tight on there and we're good. So this fly, because of these heavy eyes, is generally gonna swim upside down in the water like this. So a fish that might have, say, and this is kind of a minnow imitation. So a fish might have often a white belly and a colored top. So see something like that, that's going to look kind of like a bass. So it's like I said, it's going to swim upside down. So if you want that white on the bottom and the green on the top, so we're going to put the white on top then. I hope that makes sense. Because, you know, a lot of fish, they'll have a white belly. A trout does, a bass does. And so my theory is let's try to match that. So just like we did last week, we're going to take a little bunch of hair. We're going to cut it down close to the hide. We're not going to be so particular about stacking it this week in the hair stacker. You can if you want a little bit. I don't know, what does your pattern call for? Do you know, Joe? Oh, I just stabbed myself in the finger. But
no, it doesn't. I don't believe it needs to be stacked.
Okay. We won't worry about stacking it. So I'm going to put this one in here. You'll notice sometimes these have a little bend. I'm going to turn this clump over. So now it's really bending down towards the hook. And you'll notice where my thread is. It's just behind the eye. Let's see if I can turn this to the camera a little better for you. Just behind those eyes. And that's where we're going to start with this one. We're going to lay it on top. We're going to give it 3 or 4 wraps right here behind those dumbbell eyes. And those wraps are all one on top of the other, right in the same spot. I'm not trying to cover this hair with the thread. I don't want to cover it much at all, but I got to put a few wraps there. Now we're going to transition over to the front of the eyes. And notice I did that underneath. I don't have thread going between my eyes there because when I transition from the back to the front, I went underneath. You're never going to see it underneath. There's plenty of thread there, so that's where you want to hide that. It went a little tight back here. Let's try this again. So if you pull too tight on this deer hair, it'll really flare out on you. We don't want that. I'm tangled up. There we go. So those are a couple of loose wraps in the back. We're going to move up to the front. That's better. And be careful to not pull on this. It's really easy. And I did, in fact. You can still pull this around back and forth. And by pulling it, I mean I'm able to slide it through those threads one way or the other. You know, by either pulling on the tail this way or pulling on the front this way to adjust that length. But you'd rather not have to do that. So be careful to not pull on it. Hold these threads in place. Give it a few wraps up in front. And when you lift to cut, again, you're going to cut on top. You're going to cut at that same angle of the hook. Be careful to not pull. Cut some of that out from the eye of the hook if you have to. Give it a few wraps to anchor it down. We're going to put a nice cone head or cone nose or head on this at the end, but you don't need to go crazy with the thread yet because we've got more deer hair to insert here. So if you have a rotary vise, go ahead and turn it upside down for this step. If you don't, complain to the class creator there, complain to Joe about his materials. No, I'm kidding. You guys get what you pay for here. You know, a rotary vise is nice at times, but it's not all too often. So this hair we want to be about the same length. So let's slide it in there with our right hand and look at it. And it's going to get all bunched up and bent over in the as it hits the vise and hits the hook. But don't worry about that. It'll all straighten out in the end. But as you can see, the majority of it's passing right along past the hook and the vise. And it's going to be that same length now as the white hairs. So we're going to pinch that in place. A couple of loose wraps. And this time I'm just up in front of the dumbbell eyes. I'm not going to anchor it behind the eyes at all. We're just going to anchor it up front. A few good tight wraps on that. And again, be careful to not pull on this hair when you lift it to cut it. Just cut it clean there. Trim it a bit if you need to. So you'll notice, if I can get it in the camera just right. Oh, now it's out of focus. There we go. So you'll notice my thread has really stopped back here. I still have a little bit of room there before I get to the eye. And you want to cut those hairs off, you know, ahead of your thread so that you can then wrap thread over those little bits of hair that are sticking out really. Now we're going to build a nice size nose or cone head on this here. Just about like that. Move this camera's off to the side a bit. That's a little better. So that's about it. We're gonna get a little head cement on there. We're gonna whip finish. Oops. Again, I like to put my cement on before I whip finish. Really works that cement down into the knot. 2 finishes, about 3 wraps a piece. And that's that. Well, there is one more thing I'll show you here because so every fly has a weak spot, a spot where it's going to wear out first when you're fishing it. And this one is right on top here. These little fibers, they like to break off from the thread in the back or the thread in the front, and they stick up on you. Looks like alfalfa. So I do like to put a little bit of head cement up there on those fibers, right between the eyes. And that's that. So, you know, I had mentioned these green fibers as I jammed them in there that were hitting the vise and hitting the hook. You can sort all that out when you get it out of the vise. So there it is, the Clouser Minnow. I think we're probably ready to tie one all together. Let's get our hooks in the vise and our thread on. And remember, you just need thread up on the front half of the hook or so. You don't need to go all the way to the back on this one. And we'll wait for everyone to get their thread on before we proceed.
Looks like everybody's got it, Bob.
Okay, thanks. Turn my volume up there so I can hear you guys better. All right. So first step was the tail. So you'll want to probably take 2 of these pieces. So Joe should have given you guys all these little, maybe 4-inch pieces of flash. I'm going to tie these in somewhere near the middle. So I've got 2 ends sticking out the back this way at the length I want. Give it a few wraps that way. Fold it over. Whoops. I need to give it a few more wraps. So I folded it, I was pulling it. So we'll give it 5 or 6 good wraps in there. And we'll fold the other end back. And tie it down good. So now we've got 4 strands. Stick them back. Straight back on our hook. So let's do that step and then we'll move on from there.
Aspen, try to keep your thread a little bit shorter. It'll make wrapping it easier, okay? Okay, Mike, looks like we're ready to move on. Or Bob, excuse me.
Thanks, Joe. So next would be the dumbbell eyes. And again, we're going to make a little seat and stay back here. Let's see, how far back am I? I'm a good 1/4 inch back from the eye of the hook. Oh, this is not a bent down eye. That's okay, we'll make it work. I'm a good ways back from that eye of the hook, and I'm going to put 1 bump there. Come forward a little and put another bump there. Should we just do that? And then, yeah, let's do that step. Let's get our 2 thread bumps ready.
Looks like they're ready, Bob.
All right, now we're going to set that dumbbell eyes right in between the 2 bumps we've created. Start with just some figure-8 type thread wraps. And then always remember to do this when we're staying on top of the hook. We're just circling around the eyes, and that's gonna do that nice and tight, and it'll really suck things together. A couple of wraps just on the hook itself to anchor your thread again. Now this one I'm going under the hook and over the eye, and under the hook and over the eye. And as I go over the eye, I'm staying on the same side of the hook. As I go under the hook, I'm staying on the same side of the eyes. If that makes sense. And then again with that circular wrap, staying above the hook, staying below the eyes. And you'll notice I'm holding my hook stable here, and I'm really cranking on this thread. You can see how much that, that hook wants to wiggle around as I make those wraps. So you see just how tight I'm holding that thread. And those are good and tight. Yeah, I could still wiggle them if I really try to, but it's pretty tight. So go ahead and do that.
Hey, Sonia, you're a little close to the eye of your hook. You're not gonna have much room for hair there. You might want to put it a little bit further back.
Yeah, I'm back far enough. That's about another whole dumbbell eye I could fit up there between the dumbbells and the eye of the hook.
It's going to be just a minute or so, Bob, while Sonia backs that off.
That's quite all right.
Hey, Bob,
Yes, sir.
yeah, I kind of like super glue to hold my eyes on.
Yeah,
Just once I kind of get them wrapped, throw a dollop of super glue on them.
that's a fine
Stops all
idea.
the movement around.
That's a fine idea. I've really never had a problem with the eyes while fishing this. They get loose or move on me much. You know, that deer hair, it's only going to last through 5 or 6 fish. You know, if you're catching fish on this, those teeth on this hair, it doesn't last too long. But so that's really the weak point on this fly. There's not much you can do for that.
Yeah, I use artificial hair. It lasts longer.
Bob, looks like we're ready.
Okay. So again, the white hair first. It's just going to swim upside down. So again, if I put this one back, we did that white hair on top and the green on the bottom. As this swims upside down, it's going to, you know, hopefully look more like that, which is pretty well the color of a bass or something, a little bass minnow you might find in some of the area lakes. So the white deer hair, pull out a clump about like so. Cut it down close to the hide. We're not going to worry about stacking this one. We're going to set it in there. So again, this tail here sticks out past the bend of the hook, about the length of half of the hook shank. So, you know, I guess from the eye of the hook here, I want about a shank and a half is the length I'm looking for here. So we'll lay that right in there, and my thread's right behind the eyes. And I'm going to put 3 or 4 wraps in here. These you don't want too tight, else it'll flare. And I move my thread up to the front of the eyes already. And I crossed underneath the bottom of the eyes. Have a look at it here. Make sure it's not too flared. Make sure it wants to stay on top of the hook. I'm going to hold this in my right hand while I flop this thread over with my left a couple times. Now we can start giving it some tight wraps. 4 or 5 of those. Cut this. Now
Remember,
I'm not,
watch him. Wait till he's done before you guys start tying that part.
these hairs really want to lay down on me, but that's okay. This hook I have has a straight eye on it. This first one had a downward turned eye, if you see the difference there. And, you know, I prefer the downward turned eyes. I like to cut with my scissors right along that angle to cut these on top. So if you have the downward turned eyes, I'm not sure which ones you guys got in your kits. If you have the downward turned eyes, follow that angle with your scissors. Go ahead and do that step. Sonia, hold that hair down in your right hand and drop it over with your left. There you go. And drop that thread over with your left a couple times. Good one. Now you can switch the bobbin back to your right hand, and hopefully the hair will stay there for you.
I think we're good to go, Bob.
Excellent. So onto the green then, and again, this is where I'm going to turn my vise upside down. I'll take a nice little clump of the green hair. Oh, that's a bit much. Yeah, that looks about right. We'll cut that right down close to the hide. Get rid of some of these short ones. There we go. So again, we'll just jam that right up into the vise and all. And some get all splayed out, but you can see that some of these are going to be just the right length there. That's perfect. Vise is loose. Tighten that up. So there we have it. I'm going to hold it in place with my left hand. And this time I'm just up in front of the eyes. I'm not behind the eyes at all. A few loose wraps and then tighter. You'll see this whole time I'm going to keep holding this in place with my left hand. A few more tight wraps. And we can cut that off. And you'll see I'm cutting all this behind the eye of the hook. Still see that hook. I do have a hair or two in the eye of the hook. The white ones are sticking in there. That's okay. Anchor those down good, and yeah, you can do that step. Go ahead.
Think we're all there, Bob.
Excellent. So then we can flip this back right side up. Finish our little bit of a cone there. Tapered nose on this minnow. And whip finish. Don't forget a little glue between the eyes. Was I leaning into it too much? Oh, that's close.
Looks like we're all good, Bob.
Excellent.